So, Lands Branch, Saskatchewan Agriculture Lands Branch gets to administer the agriculture crown land in the surveyed portion of Saskatchewan. So everything in that green area is in the surveyed portion of Saskatchewan. Our job is to administer the agriculture crown land in that portion. The red land, of course, is not in the surveyed portion of Saskatchewan. That's crown land as well, all crown land across the north pretty well. And that's administered by the Ministry of Environment. So there's two land agencies for the provincial government that look after crown land in the province. And probably you knew that. You'll see some red dots. You know, and recognize it as Moose Mountain Park and Danielson and Saskatchewan Landing and Cypress, of course, administered by Environment, Ministry of Environment. The rest of the land scattered throughout the province is provincial crown that we end up administering. And you'll notice that along the south here and on the west side, there's quite a bit of provincial crown land. There always has been. I mean, homesteading started from the east, went to the west, and a lot of these lands were taken up. A lot of these marginal lands ended up with the province, and they ended up as crown land. This is better. So we have all types of crown land. We have a little bit of crown land left that's cultivated land, farmed on an annual basis, seeded to cereal crops. We've got about 500,000 acres of crown land that's cultivated. And most of it comes from the Saskatchewan Land Bank Commission. If you go back far enough, you know that in the late 70s and early 80s, Saskatchewan Land Bank Commission operated in the province, and they acquired farmland, bought farmland from people, rented it back to the same people or other people if there was no family to take it over. And there was about 1 million acres of Saskatchewan Land Bank Commission land. And when Saskatchewan Land Bank closed in about 83, that land came over to the province. So about 1 million acres came over in the end about 83, and we've since sold a lot of that back to those same lessees, or if they no longer needed it, we sold it by tender. Grazing land, native prairie, tame forages as well. That's the bulk of the land that the Ministry of Agriculture operates. And I've updated the slide here to, it'll be about 7.5 million acres of native prairie that's crown owned in the province of Saskatchewan, administered by the Ministry of Agriculture. And I set it at that time frame because, as you know, we're in the third year of a 5-year program of transferring federal pastures back to the province of Saskatchewan. So when we're done that process in 2018, we'll run at roughly that many acres of native prairie. So that plus a bit of cultivation, the province will be about 8 million acres, I guess. So a lot of that land is, that native prairie, as you know, is in federal and provincial community pastures. The federal government operated 61 pastures across the province. Those are all coming back to the province, and the province operates about 50 or a little over community pastures in the province as well. We operate under a group known as the Saskatchewan Pastures Program, operates out of Lands Branch, and they operate the community pastures, provincial community pastures. So they may be large acreages, the federal and provincial community pastures, but our biggest acreage, of course, is in private leases that we lease to individual ranchers throughout the province. That's where the biggest acreage of native prairie crown land is. So you've seen this map before, and it's on the wall over there. You've seen the south of the divide area, and this map tries to show in the dark green the provincial crown land that is in that area. So that's why they asked us to talk at some of these things, because we administer a lot of land in this area. There's a lot of Crown land in the south of the Divide area. This map happens to show the federal pastures that are in the south of the Divide area that will by 2018 be a part of the provincial Crown land in Saskatchewan. It does show as well, oops, getting ahead of myself here. It does as well show things like the arena pasture here. What do we got here? Dixon pasture, Mankota pasture, shows some of the SPP pastures in that area. So a lot of large blocks of intact native prairie, either federally, provincially, going to be all provincial very soon, I guess. So a rough estimate of the Crown acreage in south of Divide. There's 10 PFRA pastures in that area that will transition, probably about 500,000 acres of federal land moving to provincial status. Those 3 Saskatchewan pastures that I showed you, Mankota, Dixon, and Arena, they're in south of the Divide. Grasslands Park is also in south of the Divide. Both the west block and the east block are in south of the Divide area. Grasslands Park, about 100,000 acres of provincial Crown land has transferred over the years into the Grassland Park. About 100,000 acres in the Grassland Parks. We have 14 co-op pastures in that block as well. Another 135,000 acres. We have 15 leases with individuals or corporate ranches that have greater than 10,000 acres in that area. Quite a number of smaller leases. We think about 1.5 million acres of Crown land in south of the Divide. So we've always been about multiple use on these lands in south of the Divide. We graze them, of course. That's one of our main uses. Where there's a possibility for oil and gas, we develop oil and gas on them. Where there's a possibility for gravel, we develop gravel. They're used for multiple use by the province. So another figure roughly, may not make it, but we always had about 6,500 oil and gas surface leases on Crown land within the province. And by 2018, and I'm putting everything at 2018, we'll inherit another 2,500 oil and gas surface leases on the PFRA pastures. They'll come over and be provincial owned and operated as well. So we have about 10,000 surface leases, oil and gas properties in the province. Not a terrible lot in south of the Divide. It's not real great gas country, where we have good gas country along the west side of the province, which requires a lot of surface leases. The Great Sand Hills, for instance, in that area, that's where we get a majority of our oil and gas surface leases, but they're throughout the area. So as I mentioned, we believe in multiple use of Crown land. We use it for all different types of use, but the biggest use is grazing. Whether you're basically in south of the Divide, you're in what we call the dry brown and the moist brown range sites. That's the productivity out of the lands in this area, out of the native pasture in this area. The poorer stuff, about 1.15 AUMs per acre. The very best native prairie in the area would be about 0.35 AUMs per acre in the moist brown areas. So grazing is our biggest use. Gravel is used. It's kind of like an endangered species anymore. No, that wouldn't be put it quite right, but it's hard to acquire. It's hard to come by too anymore. So we have gravel for highways, RMs, contractors. We do oil and gas operations. A lot of the land that we had, about half of the native prairie that we had is included in the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act. So it's recognized by the province as being important for wildlife as well. And the large intact blocks of native prairie, of course, are home to species at risk and are important that way. So, you know, we have things like prairie dogs, although most of them now are on land that has been transferred to the grasslands park. We still have a couple of prairie dog colonies. There'd be one in the Dixon pasture, and there's actually one in the Macefield PFRA pasture. The rest are in Grasslands Park, and so a species there. So we get involved in some kind of interesting things. This is the release of a black-footed ferret onto the prairie dog colonies in the Grasslands Park. So this guy came from Toronto and now resides in the Grasslands Park. That was one of the released back a few years ago. I don't know if he's still living, but certainly some of his offspring, they're still there, although not thriving tremendously, but they're still there. So when it comes to grazing native prairie or crown land, we believe strongly that the proper use of grazing land creates good ecological health of the land. It's good for the grassland, it's good for the wildlife, and it's good for the species at risk. So we set carrying capacities for grazing on native prairie, and basically the carrying capacity of native prairie is set at 50% of the production that's out there. A 50% utilization will keep the native prairie in good condition. So that old rule of take half, leave half is still very important as far as native prairie. And that's how we set our grazing rates. So that's one of the things that's good in this area. If you graze it properly, it'll support a lot of these species, and it'll maintain itself. Now, multiple use, I talked about that, and we do a lot of oil and gas development. And we've got reasonably good at that. We don't do any wind power development yet. We've got a wind power policy. We still haven't got wind power on any crown land in the province yet. We've got some land that's reserved for wind power, but they're looking at it and evaluating it, but we haven't got a tower on crown land yet. But for oil and gas, we basically do allow oil and gas development on native prairie. It's allowed with a project proposal and development conditions. So it has to be developed with the proper conditions. And we do have a development. We work closely with Ken and Jenna here in the Southwest. We work closely with the environment people when we develop an oil and gas site. We do get project proposals from the oil and gas company. We review them. We may have to move the site a bit, may have to mitigate it a little bit, may have to change it a little bit, but it probably eventually goes in with conditions. What we're interested in when we do an oil and gas development is we're interested in disturbing the land as little as possible. So we have minimal disturbance techniques when possible. We definitely want to see reclamation, interim reclamation, and final reclamation. We want to see it done with native species. So we want native back to native. And we've been able to do that since about 1989, when the native species and the cultivars were available for reseeding. I know you'll see a lot of old development where you'll see an old pipeline and you'll see crested wheatgrass growing down the line. Probably an old development from years ago, because today we were able to mitigate that by seeding it back to what was there before. Timing has a lot to do with oil and gas development, and the biology people tell you that. You know, you don't want to disturb the birds on the nests. You don't want to drill at that time. So Ken's group will make sure that that doesn't happen, that well doesn't get drilled when there's a problem like that. We'll do a lot of winter drilling where we can. Not always possible, but in some environments, it's strictly winter drilling. Pretty much every oil and gas development that's done now has an environmental monitoring, an environmental firm attached to it who has to follow the rules, sort of thing. I mean, you can't move a rig when it's wet. It has to be moved when it's dry. We try to make sure that we do as much linear development as we can, that we keep pipelines and roads in the same corridor so that we disturb as little as possible. So we don't limit development, but we impose conditions on it. Environment pays certain concerns to other things, water courses, timing, species at risk, that sort of thing. Ken wouldn't let us drill a well in a sagebrush left. It just wouldn't happen. So Crown lands, we do see some wildlife out there on them. So the province owns the majority of the minerals on a lot of land in Saskatchewan. They own the minerals especially so on lands in the western part of the province. Like I said, they homesteaded from east to west, and when they homesteaded, they sold a fair number of minerals on the east side. So you'll run into some freehold minerals on the east side of Saskatchewan, but very few freehold minerals, or less freehold minerals on the west side here. So we try to, the province sells the minerals, they sell it on Crown land. We try to develop those minerals with as little disturbance as we can, as little impact as we can on the land. Gravel important too. Of course, it's more intrusive for sure. It could be turned down in certain instances, but it's usually allowed to go ahead with some mitigation. Minimal disturbance, we try to keep that in mind when we put in a site. It works really well on gas development. It's a little harder to do minimal disturbance development for oil projects, especially big oil projects like horizontal wells. They take a lot of time drilling, and they involve just a lot more equipment. So they involve you might have to pad them, you might have to drill them on frozen ground, but they'll have a little more of an impact. Pretty much standard any day now to drill with tanks to catch your fluids. There's no more sumps anymore, or very few sumps. We will reseed native stands to native seed mix. We reseed tame forage to tame forage. We're careful, we want the companies to be careful not to introduce noxious weeds with equipment or seed mixes. Especially true now on, they're worried a lot about club root on cultivated land for its effect on canola. So it's important that the equipment be clean when it comes in. We don't allow drilling fluids to be spread on native prairie. They can be spread on cultivated land. We're not sure what effect they might have on all the microorganisms that are found in native prairie. So a lot of that stuff is spread on cultivated land. We don't use manure for reclamation. This is a copy of a seed certificate. We do review these for all the seed species that go into a native seed mix to deal with reclamation and to be sure that there are no noxious weeds in the seed mix. It's as pure as we can find that seed mix. So companies will supply those to us. We'll review them when we're talking about reclamation. Typical minimal disturbance site. a gas well again, of course, so that's a little bit easier to do, but typical minimal disturbance site, a blowout protector tank that's piped, and no hole is dug to put that stuff in. This is an oil well, just a picture of an oil well that we drilled on Crown land. It's sensitive Crown land. It's in the Webb Sand Hills, and to drill in the summertime, this is the padding that was put down on this one to minimize disturbance, and it was a successful well. It was the second one on a pad. It was a successful well, so there is disturbance in around what we call the teardrop area on a well site, which remains in place till it's reclaimed. This is just a quick picture of some linear development in the Great Sand Hills, where we try to keep the trails and the roads and the pipeline in the same corridor so that we decrease disturbance. Same here. This is a picture of installing gas lines in the sand hills. This is an environmentally friendly type of a plow. It's called a spider plow that rolls the pipe in. I mean, good where you can do it, and where you can't, where you run into rocks, of course, you're back into a high hole to put it in. But some of these developments you can limit the disturbance for native prairie. It's just another picture of the winching unit pulling the plow along and the pipe rolling in, and this was in the sand hills as well, so very little rock, and it's something you could do there. And it looks like this when you're done, and a few years later it's reclaimed really well. This was an ice road for development in the wintertime. This was one we used up in the sand hills as well. That's pretty well a Cadillac ice road because of the amount of water we could get out of the South Saskatchewan River to build that thing. I mean, you don't find that good of ice roads down in this country. There just isn't enough water to do them. But that's something you can do to protect the environment, to make the multiple use as minimal as possible.
Does your ice road not kill the grass?
No, it doesn't. No, it looks good in the spring when there still will be a prairie trail 2-track trail to access those wells, but it sure helps for the heavy equipment that they've got to move in to drill these things. So they've got a chain up to get down the road, and they'll water down the well sites as well, and then of course they bring a sanding truck in. They got to sand them so that the workers can stand on the ice to drill a well. But I mean, it was in an effort to operate in a sensitive environment. So those are the kind of mitigating things you can think of or work on to develop some of these. A lot of these, there was a lot of concern about oil and gas development in the Great Sand Hills. The Great Sand Hills actually had a 4RM group that worked together an RM group that worked together for land use planning, or what you're talking about here today. And I don't know that they ever limited development too much. They did in some cases, but they were good to work with to develop ideas like this to protect the environment and work on that environment. I don't know that they came up with the ideas, but they have enough questions of the industry that the industry supplied the ideas, like your case for the wells being drilled close to the house. Like, the industry would tell you how many decibels and everything and what they could do, and if they could put a different motor on it or a different type of pump. They would have all that kind of data to help it somewhat, So it wasn't about restricting it out here. It was about assisting and coming up with the ideas that might work for that kind of development, because I don't think there's a real hands-off area anywhere in south of the divide either, not a whole lot. So I was talking about acreages and lands and this sort of thing, and we also sell a lot of land. From time to time we sell a lot, and I actually worked with the branch back in 1983 when that 1,000,000 acres of land bank land came over to the province. So we do sell land because we're down to about 400,000 of those acres now. So we sell land from time to time, and we've always sold land. We've got some active sale programs on it right now on eligible land, but we only sell eligible land. Eligible land is land that doesn't have any gravel, doesn't have oil and gas concerns. We don't sell Wildlife Habitat Protection Act lands that are of high ecological value. Now that's kind of a new statement. For a long time we didn't sell any Wildlife Habitat Protection Act lands. We couldn't sell any Wildlife Habitat Act lands. And they've reviewed there's more new legislation. There's the Crown Conservation Easement legislation that's come in over the last years. Environment has done a big review of the wildlife habitat lands, and there's certain wildlife habitat lands that they'll now allow to be sold with a Crown Conservation Easement on them. So it's protected in a different way. It's protected with a Crown Conservation Easement, which would prevent breaking the land, wouldn't allow your residences on it, wouldn't allow an intensive livestock operation. Would allow some types of development, but not large scale. So that has changed. The Wildlife Habitat Protection Act has changed a little bit over the last couple of 3 years. You had a question, Mark?
Do you know how much of the WHPA lands are considered high ecological value?
About half. So that our inventory of native prairie without the PFRA pastures, because they've never been rated for a while. They've never been provincial lands, so they don't have a wildlife habitat rating on them. I don't know when or if they'll get around to that. I don't know when that'll happen. But I think there was about 3.7 million acres of native prairie probably that was in the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act. Probably about 1.8 of that is half of it is probably high and will stay in the act and can't be sold. The other half of that has come out of the act and is classed as moderate, and it can be sold with the Crown Conservation Easement. It's just a different means of protection.
Is that some of that marginal land, classified as marginal pasture?
Well, no. Some real good pastures are also in the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act. It has all qualities of land in it. The Wildlife Habitat Protection Act. There's no cultivated land in the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act, but there's all kinds of native prairie in the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act. There's all kinds of native prairie that isn't in the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act as well.
Can some of that be released or whatever? Because if it stays in that, it's going to get to a stage where production's not good. You got nothing but cactus in there.
Shouldn't be, properly grazed, we don't change the landscape a whole lot, We shouldn't be changing it a whole lot. No, I wouldn't think it would change. It doesn't change the quality of the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act.
Get back, you were talking about sand and gravel.
Yeah.
Who owns the gravel under the first 6 acres?
Gravel in Saskatchewan is not a mineral, so it belongs to the landowner.
Okay.
It belongs to whoever holds the title. So it belongs to the province on Crown land. It belongs to you on your deeded land. It's no longer a mineral. Hasn't been a mineral in Saskatchewan for some time.
Okay.
It's not like oil and gas, which might be Crown owned or freehold owned under the titled land.
The government owns down 1,000 feet.
I don't know how far. coal. They own minerals for as far as they go, I guess, coal and whatever, yeah. So a Crown conservation easement would also allow for limited gravel and oil and gas development. It doesn't, the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act did not stop oil and gas. It limited oil and gas to 4 wells per quarter. It allowed RMs to widen roadways, to acquire land for roadways through wildlife habitat. You could widen the right of way. It wasn't 100% restrictive like some people think. The Wildlife Habitat Protection Act restricted that land. It restricted some things on it, but not. It also allowed for a little bit of development on it.
You're saying 4 wells to a quarter, where they've got these large pads, and they got 4 wells on the one pad?
Yeah.
And
Well,
there might be
they-
one in one pad, I'm not sure.
That's right, yeah. I think nowadays they probably run a little different rule of thumb. I think they're trying to stick to about 10% of the acreage, but when the act was set up, it was specific to 4 wells per quarter. So there's quite a difference between 4 gas wells, one here, one there, and 4 big horizontal wells on a quarter. There's quite a difference between the amount of disturbance that would occur there. So I think they try to, you try to put a 5th well on wildlife habitat, and you have to mitigate that 5th well. You have to have smaller acreage or smaller sites, or put it beside another well, or maybe not put it there at all. You might be restricted.
Gas wells.
Any well,
Or any well.
any
Or-
well, a hole in the ground. Yeah. So yeah, we've always sold eligible land. Since 2008, we've had a program of incentives to sell more land, to sell more Crown land. In 2008, we had a land sale program that came in, offered a 10% discount in 2008, a 10% discount in 2009, a 10% discount off the market value of the land, the appraised value of the land in 2010, and then a sliding scale after that in 8, 9, 10, in 11, 12, 13, 14. So the program just ended in 14, where the Crown would reduce the purchase or market value by 2%. So we got through that sale program. Then we've since then we've had we've had another sale program, and that would be the sale of the Wildlife Habitat Protection Act lands. We were able to sell anything that was rated as moderate with the Crown Conservation Easement on it. So we've had a discount sale program, we've had a wildlife sale program with Crown Conservation Easements, and just in November of 15, just last year, we've got a new sale program out again, which discounts from market value 15%, and then 10% in the next year, and 5% in the final year. So we're just in the first year of that sale program, where, if we had a quarter appraised at $100,000, we'd sell it for $85,000. There'd be a discount on it. So that program came out in November of last year, and it's you have to apply for it by March 31st of this year, and that's when the 15% discount ends. The next discount runs from the next year, and so on like that. So since we started these programs, we've always sold land, but since we've had these incentives, we've sold about 500,000 acres of cultivated and native prairie, and that's the average price of the land that we've sold over those years. It's gone up. It's doubled or tripled in price since 2008 land, and that's the average price that Crown has received. And I don't know how sod affects our operations, how it'll affect Crown land operations. I don't think a whole lot. I mean, for grazing, certainly not a whole lot. Proper grazing, we get, it's a very compatible use native prairies, so I don't see a lot of effect there. The biggest thing that I think might happen there is lessees put the fence and the water on our grazing land, so that might be the biggest thing that sod will affect. Where you put a water site might be more important. I know you've got to put a water site where the water is, but if it's in good sagebrush habitat, there might be a better spot to put it. So I think where we put fence and water may be fairly important, or maybe a consideration that you could work with the south of the divide people on it. I think our oil and gas projects and pipelines will continue. We will continue to review them as we have in the past to have the least impact on the land. I don't know why I put gravel operations will require more in-depth. Sure, they'll require more in-depth stuff. They're a land use that's pretty hard to reclaim. There's very little topsoil left after we do that. As far as land conversion from pasture to cultivation, we haven't authorized any development to break crown land in the last, we haven't had any, don't even keep an application for it anymore. Haven't done a lot of that in the last 20 years, if any. We do allow rejuvenation of tame forage stands. That's an agricultural practice that doesn't go away. They should be rejuvenated every once in a while. Road widening, like you say, was always allowed under the Wildlife Habitat Act. Briefly, that's how we operate in this area that's south of the divide on those crown lands. So in your discussions today on development or sod in the area, that's just to let you know what we do in the area. On your public land in the area. There's a lot of public land in that sod area. So
Thanks, Lorne.
so yeah, as you're looking for whatever you're going to do to work with RMs to preserve habitat in the area, I think that's the idea of the workshop program. So there's no outcome for that. There's just food for thought.
So, questions?
So as crown lands are sold into small, I assume it's into smaller parcels.
Our crown land sales are to our lessee.
Yeah.
Like we will only sell land to our lessee.
Oh.
So they're being bought. They're not going into smaller units. I mean, if a guy has a large ranch, he's making more of that ranch feed. Our cultivated parcels are more likely a quarter here or there that fit into, but any native prairie we sell is probably in addition to a large block, a change from crown ownership to deeded ownership.
Okay, so because my question was, is it created a need for new infrastructure to support the private, but I guess if it's in the same size block, you wouldn't need new roads or new.
Yeah, it's for sale to our lessee. I mean, our biggest sale program is to our lessee. We do get land back from time to time. So it's not land that's leasable. It's doesn't contain oil and gas, doesn't contain gravel. If there's no interest in the Crown keeping it, and those are the main interests, then we would sell it by tender. So those lands could go into.
The lessee still has first, anybody's leasing whether the cultivator or not, has first choice.
Yeah, the lessee has the only choice to buy. Yeah, those contracts, they either keep leasing it or they buy it. Some people will get a price on it and decide to keep leasing it. It was only these little bits that people give up that are eligible for sale that we would sell by tender. Yeah. A lot of our sale program has been cultivated land, but not all of it, no. No. And we'll soon be out of cultivated land. It's getting less and less. Mm-hmm.
How do you come up with the price for the land?
Comparable sales. We can either, department staff, agrologists within the department can price it, and they use comparable sales of similar land. It's not very hard nowadays, there's a lot of market for land, so there's a lot of comparables out there. So we can price it, or you have the option of hiring an appraiser, a private appraiser to price it. The private appraiser must have his AAIC designation, Agricultural Appraisal Institute of Canada designation, because an agricultural appraiser.
Did you use the assessment value?
Oh, yeah.
Some do that?
Some do. That's sort of how we get the quality, especially on cultivated land. We get the quality fairly well from the assessment. We don't get the quality quite as well from the assessment on native prairie. But there hasn't been a lot of time spent on assessing native prairie over the years, but
You were showing $337 an acre, is that for?
that's for half a million acres of land over that 2008 to current.
That includes grassland too, at
Yeah.
the same price?
Oh, no, that includes, you know, maybe grassland at the start of the project at, a couple $100 an acre. It would include, you know, Regina heavy clay is worth, $350,000 a quarter now. We don't have any. We didn't end up with any. We didn't end up with any of the, you know, the B and C crop insurance lands. We don't have a lot of it. But I mean, land is all over the price, all over the map, depending on the quality of where it is. And it's all 3 times more expensive than it was in 2008. You know, it's gone up. The average would have been less than that if we'd have been given this presentation back in 2009. You know, the value has continued to go up.
Yeah, well, you had all kinds of money available at one time.
For,
Well,
or you mean farmers did buy
Yeah,
it? Or-
you know, syndicates were providing the money to buy the land, you know.
But not so much in our case, because we sold to our lessees.
Still.
That didn't mean that they couldn't turn around and sell it to somebody else, but I mean, most of our people were buying it to add to their unit. It was, you know, people are interested in, not a lot of people are interested in buying a big block of pasture land, but a lot of people are interested in buying another quarter beside the house or beside the farmyard, you know. We do see some interest in people wanting to buy their native prairies beside their house,
Yeah,
or contains the water well that they spent $40,000 drilling it, and so they'd like to own that quarter of land. You know, there's all different reasons people have for acquiring land. Yeah?
I was going to point out that not all the land in federal pastures is native. There's some bits of tame grass in those.
That is true, like the reason they are PFRA pastures, part of the reason they are that is because a lot of that land was homesteaded and developed in the 30s, and a lot of it blew away and had problems with it. So in 1935, when PFRA was enacted, they were the agent that the province transferred a bunch of land to and ceded it back to grass. So there are a lot of parts in the PFRA are tame forage.
Early in your presentation, you mentioned you kind of lumped them in, kept calling them native prairie.
Yeah.
Not entirely native prairie.
No, they're not. There are lands in PFRA pastures which are good tame forage properties. You know, there's good enough soils that they can be redeveloped. There are lands in tame forage lands in PFRA pastures that should be left alone and just revert back to native, like they don't. They were lucky to get them seeded and controlled back in those cities. So. Yeah. No.
Of the timeline you're talking about, how much would be tame forage?
I have no idea. Not that much as compared to native. Yeah. And I mean, you see some interesting things. I mean, sometimes you'll get into a pasture that's, you know, the Clayton grazing block. I've been down in there. You'll get into pastures that are pretty good looking native stands of grass. But you can see the flower rows in them. You can see the stone piles. I mean, quite a few years of the time passing has just reverted them back to fairly decent native standard in some cases. It's interesting. You wonder who piled all those rocks out there into the water. And,
Kites.
yeah. Yeah.
Why, when they government turned this over to Veitch, why didn't they keep it up? They have to make it back to them. Why didn't they keep it going like that?
Why didn't the province take it over and run them, or?
Rather than themselves.
They don't have a lot of desire to increase government staff. They're in the process of reducing government staff. They believe strongly in private ownership of land, so it's being leased back to Cajun groups. I think they struggle with the cost of operating pastures. I mean, you put cattle in a PFRA or a provincial pasture, you put them in at a certain rate. You don't see an increase in your bill when they clean out 20 ducats. You know, it doesn't go up, it stays the same. There's a lot of capital money is spent on those operations. But it's a cost.
Yeah,
It looks
that
like
like a community back, so that's part of the thing.
most of it is funded, but just the same, like, you don't see a big increase when they buy a new tractor and build 20 miles of it. You don't see it, it's not passed on to those people. There's capital money spent in pastures, which now probably won't be spent in pastures. You'll do your own lease, or those producers would use it.